What's up, friends? Welcome to Leaders, Letters, and Legacy alongside Dr. Marianne Calais. I'm your co-host, Scott Fussell, and we are thrilled you decided to tap play and spend some time with us today. We'd love it if you'd consider the show a verbal archives for many of the stories and the people who've shaped the fraternity sorority movement for the past 2+ centuries. It's time we shine a light on leaders. It's time we help them write a love letter about their letters. It is time we talk about the legacy we want to leave behind. It's time for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. Let's go. Welcome to part one of our two-part conversation with legendary fraternity man, Theta Chi's Dave Westol. In today's episode, we talk about the role happenstance, misunderstandings, and an open heart and an open mind have played in his fraternity journey. Enjoy. It has been a crazy few days. I'm so excited to see you this morning. I'm excited to get into this conversation. What's up? How you doing?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Man, if I was a dog, I'd be wagging my tail.
Well, I'm probably sounding a little like I'm in a barrel. In Louisiana last week, we had historic snow.
Yes.
Did you hear what I just said? Louisiana and snow.
How do you spell snow in Louisiana?
S-N-E-A-U-X.
That's what I thought. Okay. All right. Yeah. Y'all do things different. Y'all do things differently there.
We do. We're a little special. Gosh. But most snow, on record since 1895. 1895.
What was that like back in 1895? How did you get through that one?
Well, I walked up the hill barefoot back in the day, but this year we had the proper boots and jackets and gloves and all the things. We made a Mardi Gras snowman, of course.
Of course you did.
Celebrate. So we had a great time, really great time, and but as a result, I'm sounding a little more raspy.
All good. I'm glad you guys had that experience. It was fun to see all the photos from Louisiana.
But then this weekend, Scott, you those Theta Phi Alphas are good to you. My sorority sister, Amanda Horvat, we're going to give her a little shout out. Who works for Alpha Gamma Rho. Scott Pinch Hit. Is that
Pinch
right?
Hit.
Yeah.
Pinch Hit, yeah.
Yeah. This weekend, Amanda called 11 o'clock Wednesday night and said, hey, you think Scott could do this? He needs to be on a plane tomorrow night. Like, he's got this. So Scott facilitated. Tell us a little bit. You were in Albany, New York. Alpha Gamma Road, right?
I got it. Yes, exactly. And I got to tell you, I need to look on a map because I'm still not entirely sure what part of New York I was in. I'm not even kidding. It was nuts. I woke up to a text from Amanda on Thursday morning saying, hey, what do you got going on Friday and Saturday? Which is the most loaded question ever, right? So it's like,
yeah,
what exactly are you asking for? We wound up connecting around 8:30, and she shared what was going on and asked if I could do it. And 6 hours later, I'm on a flight and on my way to, let's see, where were we headed? To New York, then to Albany. And
Albany is in New York,
No. New York City, sorry. Jeez, gosh.
I know you're from Middle Tennessee. I know.
Now you're just being hurtful. Now you're just being hurtful.
Well, you just picked on the Louisiana people for our EAU.
I got great joy from you. So anyway, so I go up to Albany, and we're 18 hours away from this experience, and it's their Top Leaders Institute.
Award-winning program. She'll remind you.
Absolutely. Award-winning program. So there was some pressure to deliver because there's a standard has been set here. And so it was and you've presented with me enough to know that I don't 5 years ago I did not do spontaneity super well. And I want things a certain way. and I don't really love presenting other people's content. And so it was a big risk on her part to ask me to do this, even though, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but it was somebody else's content, and it was a big risk on her part to ask me. And it's an award-winning program. It's somebody else's content. And, but I got to tell you, I crammed like a absolute champion pre-med student, getting ready for finals or something. Got after it on the plane, spent the evening and the next morning getting everything together, and man, we wound up having a really incredible experience in Troy, which is right next to Albany. But amazing students and amazing volunteers and great staffers. Grant from their staff was my right hand all weekend, and we made for a really great team. And it was just an
Grant's
incredible
awesome.
experience, and yeah, it was awesome. So thanks for, we for those on the outside world, Mac is my unpaid agent. So people generally, when they want to know if I'm available for something or if I'm capable of something, she's usually the filter which they go through. And so thanks for giving Amanda the, hey, yeah, yeah, he can do this. And so it was great fun and a lot of work and just a fascinating turn of events. And but it was a whirlwind couple of days, and 48 hours later, I'm back in Indy. So, but
For our listeners, Scott, who don't, Scott and I travel and we're on campuses, we're in communities, we're working with corporations and organizations. And you'll learn a little bit from our guest today who does the same kind of work, different but same. But, people always ask, do you like traveling? And for me, the travel is just the means to get to the good stuff, right?
yep,
And
yep,
so when you get to have these opportunities to be with students and be with professionals and volunteers who believe in this thing called fraternity and sorority, sometimes you just rework your schedule and you put your big girl panties on and you roll with it. Not you so much, but
thank you.
I just think it's an honor to serve the people that we get to serve, and I think that's part of the beauty. So I know you killed it. I'm so proud of you. And if I didn't think you could do it, I wouldn't have put my reputation and
Yeah,
my name on the line to say this guy Scott. So we were confident that you
yeah.
would just knock it out the park. So
Well,
great work.
I'll tell you this. Thank you. There are two men that come to mind when I think about this weekend, and one is today's guest, the other is my father. And you just mentioned the word serve, and I think, and I go back to 8 or 10 years ago. I find a church here in Indianapolis and call my dad up and say, "Hey, I think I found a church here," and I'm thinking he's going to be so proud of his heathen son for finding a church and give me a pat on the back or something. But there was no pat on the back. There was immediately the first question was, "Well, that's great. How are you serving?" And because to him, church was not about sitting in the rows on a Sunday. It was getting out into the community the other 6 days of the week. And so I've tried to apply that same lesson to all the areas of my life at this point. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity to grow and develop and to coach other people, but it was also a really important opportunity to get to serve others. And hopefully we did it well. I feel like it was a good experience for everybody, and I think we pulled it off. So it was great fun and a great opportunity. But I will tell you, I don't think this weekend would have happened. It wouldn't even been on my radar if it weren't for today's guest. And we've got a fraternity legend on the show today. Legend.
We sure
Okay.
do.
Longtime anti-hazing advocate, longtime pro-fraternity positive experience advocate, former Theta Chi exec, longtime high school football referee, has this unique gift in that there is not a single college mascot in the United States that he doesn't know. So you throw the most random school at him, and he will know the mascot of that university, that college. But and he's also the owner and the principal of Lumberlost Consultants, and he's just his entire professional career, whether it's on a football field or in a chapter house, has been devoted to developing young men and developing young leaders.
Yep.
And I will tell you, he also is solely responsible for turning my fraternity perspective completely upside down. In 1995, I was this young hotshot consultant at Beta Theta Pi and thought that I had it all together. And I was arrogant enough to believe that we had a monopoly on All Stars. And then I came over to Indy with my fellow consultants, and we went to the Theta Chi headquarters and we were training with a bunch of other new, recently onboarded consultants in the other fraternity headquarters here in Indy. And this guy named Dave Westall came into the room. They introduced him, and I'd never heard of him. And for the next 2 hours, he completely rocked my world. He was doing a presentation on called Hazing on Trial. And I didn't come from a big hazing chapter. So everything he was teaching, like I didn't feel like it completely impacted or spoke to my experience, but I saw how it impacted so many others. And the lessons I was learning from that, how I had to take those on the road. And I was completely blown away by him in this 2 hours. And literally fast forward 20 years, and I'm back in the field, see him at a conference, and I go up and introduce myself, and I was like, Dave, there's no way you remember me. This is going back 20 years or so. I had a lot more hair back then, and my name's Scott Fusel. I'm with Beta Theta Pi, and you just need to know that the time you spent with us back then completely changed my view of fraternity and interfraternalism. Didn't realize how impactful just getting outside the bubble of your organization could be. So when I say that experiences like we just discussed about last weekend wouldn't have happened without Dave, that's not hyperbolic. That's God's honest truth. So we were thrilled today to have legitimately a legend in the fraternity field, and we were so excited to have him. So please welcome to the show our good friend, Theta Chi's Dave Westall. Dave, man, so good to see you. So
So
good to
good to
see
see
you.
the two of you.
There he
Man.
is. There he is. You're looking good. I knew he would laugh. He would laugh.
Another sarcastic comment from Mac.
Well, I hope you're used to it and ready for it, because that's generally what we get. We get
Oh,
at least 60 to 90 minutes of those on the show
oh,
here.
yeah. This
Go
Scott
ahead,
just
Mac.
gave me this glowing intro. I think one of the things that our listeners probably, and especially if they know you, right? You helped raise a lot of us in the field. You were one of the first people, same with me, that, when you did hazing on trial, I think my jaw hit the ground. And I was
Yeah.
like, my goodness, that's not what I said, but I'll say it for our listeners in that way. But, I just think you introduced the concept of personal responsibility when it came to hazing to so many of us, and not only to not not to participate, but to be activists in stopping it, right? And
Yes.
so the fact that you blended sports, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that today, but sports and fraternity and all the things. So thank you for not only raising thousands of young Theta Chi's, but many of us in the field. And I love that you're still doing good work when you could
Yes.
be, sitting somewhere just chilling out, and you're still doing investigations and speaking on campuses and working with exec boards, and and when people say, why do you still do this? I think it's because we all believe that this is still good for young people and for all of us as
Absolutely.
we ages and stages of life. So welcome, Dave. We're honored to have you today.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
All right, Dave, we want the whole story. So we want to go back to growing up, and I want to go back to Michigan State, and I want to go back to what landed you on the front porch of Theta Chi. So tell us a little bit about growing up. Tell us a little bit about what took you to Michigan State, and how you landed on the front porch.
I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, the middle of three boys, no girls. My mother had a straight shot to heaven, as she liked to say. And and when we were growing up, my dad would buy us football helmets every year, and I always got green with a white stripe. My older brother, who was obnoxious, probably should have been a beta. He would get a blue helmet and then put yellow adhesive tape on it to look like Michigan Wolverines. So we would, when we tackled him, we'd rip the tape off, which he deserved. I found myself becoming more and more interested in journalism. I went to community college for 2 years, a little over 2 years in Lansing, and then transferred to Michigan State. I was not ready for varsity, and I promptly flunked out, took a year off. In those days, the draft, of course, is very active. So by sheer happenstance, I'd signed up with another guy for the Michigan Army National Guard, and they called and said, "Hey, you're in." So the fraternity part kicks in when I was playing some football with some guys on a large area near Frandor, which is a shopping center right between Lansing and East Lansing, where Michigan State is. And we looked down the field and saw two very attractive women playing tennis at the end of the field on a court. And I said, "I'm going long." One of the women had long dark hair and a blue shirt with white letters. And I didn't know what anything meant, but I just thought, someone said, "Oh, she's probably in a sorority." I said, "So?" So I run down and I said, I catch the pass, running through the end zone and stand in the middle of her tennis game. There's nothing salacious about what I'm about to say. She said, "You're in the middle of my tennis game." And I said, I will stand here until I get your digits. Now, what I meant was her phone number, 70s parlance. So her friend said, "Go ahead. He won't remember it anyway." She did. And I run back to the huddle and say, "You guys help me remember this." And her name was Nancy McCauley, and she happened to be a member of Zeta Tau Alpha. And for the next 3 weeks, we're peas and carrots. I mean, she's teaching me how to play chess, and I'm teaching her about athletics, and we're having a great time. She's also a communication arts major. We get back to school, and she goes into the witness protection. I can't get a hold of her. And in those halcyon days, as you guys may remember, there was one line going into the house, and the ZTA house, and then they would page, Nancy McCauley of a line, call on line 3 or whatever, and I couldn't get her. So I stopped by one night after class. I was taking classes in the evening, and we talked, and I said I thought we had something going here, and she said, "Well, I'm just having such a wonderful time. My first quarter is at Michigan State, was on quarters, and my first quarter in the chapter house, and I'm having a wonderful time." And I said, "I'll bet you're spending a lot of time with those frat guys." And she said, "Would you please call them fraternity men?" And first time and not the last time I've been corrected by a ZTA or anyone else. And I said, "Okay, fraternity men." And we finally got down to it. I had a built-in prejudice against the guys I thought were all rich daddy's kids who didn't have to do anything, and I was the working class hero. And she said, "Well, don't knock it until you tried it." So we ended up, I asked her what chapters she thought were among the better ones at Michigan State. And she said, "Well, these guys are this, these guys are that." I thought she said, "The nicest guys are the Theta Chi's." That always resonated with me, stuck with me. So the following spring, there's something called Informal Rush, and Theta Chi is listed. So I stopped by and meet the guy who's going to go on to become my big brother, Mike Zimmerman. And he's very friendly, and he says, "Come on over Wednesday night. We'll set up dinner," and so on and so forth. And I end up joining Theta Chi.
And we'll be right back. Leadership isn't about a title, it's about impact. Leadership is built on principles, strengthened through service, and proven through consistency. It's about the ability to inspire, to serve others first, and to show up with integrity every single day. Great leaders don't demand trust, they earn it. They don't just talk about change, they make it happen. If you're ready to lead with purpose, visit mariannecale.com or scottfuselcoaching.com to schedule a conversation and discover how you can lead with authenticity, service, and consistency. Leadership. Lead with purpose. Serve with heart. Now back to the show.
And then to show you how profoundly weak the community was, the following fall, I end up on the Interfraternity Council, Executive Council, plug in as a vice president. And then I'm elected president the next spring. So I've gone from being not a member to president of the IFC
Wow.
in 1 year, which tells you a lot about the state of the system. Um, I see Nancy, the woman that I had met originally on the tennis court, and I see her at the final event for Greek Week that spring. She's about to graduate. She said, "Well, you certainly jumped in with both feet." And I said, "Well, I have you to thank. You're the one that steered me in the right direction." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You told me the nicest guys for Theta Chi's." And she she put her hands to her face and said, "Oh my God, Dave." I said, "Delta Chi." The Delta Chi's remind me of on a regular basis, but that was true. ZA and D Chi were brother sister. So much for that.
That,
Um,
I love that you not only could you not remember her phone number, you couldn't even remember the name of the organization she was steering you towards. Okay, sorry, but as much
no,
grief as you've given me about Beta Theta Pi over the years, I got to take at least one shot there. I hope that's
the
okay.
men of Woogland. That's right.
that's
Well,
So
awesome,
good.
Dave. That is awesome. I didn't know
Man.
that
well,
story. I did not know that story.
two things that I want to leave with your listeners. In both cases, these incidents had a profound effect on my trajectory.
Yep.
And one of them was right after I joined that spring, and we have a pledge class of 15, which is eventually whittled down to 10. Some of the idiots in my chapter, and I often say the chapter I joined was not the same chapter I became a member of. And what I meant
Mm.
was a lot of the older guys that I thought were really had it together moved on or drifted away, and the younger guys coming up were not at the same type. And the hazers in the chapter decided that our pledge class was too big and we needed to be brought down to size. So they said, "We're going to carry you over the summer and then initiate you through Hell Week in the begin before the fall." And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, okay, I guess this is how they do things, but it sounds kind of dumb. And it was. Of the 10 guys remaining, when they made that announcement, 7 of them left over the summer and they just walked away. They said, "We're not going to wait. We know what's coming." So when Hell Week started in late September, there were 3 of us, and I'll never
Mm.
forget the shock on the faces of some of the members when we walked through that front door, and they said, "Well, where's the rest of the pledge class?" So we don't know. It's not our day to watch them. And in those days, you communicated by letter primarily and phone call, and we lost 7 guys, and there was a mad scramble. That generated an emergency meeting of the Alumni Corporation on a Sunday morning right after rush. I sat for 2.5 hours and sipped on a Diet Pepsi. And a guy named Robert Hood was the Alumni Corporation president, an attorney, and really sharp guy. And I watched him facilitate a discussion and get to
Mm.
the details with the undergraduates. My brothers, who were the officers, and they were trying to conceal what had actually happened, as is typical. And Bob skillfully led them into a safe place where they could speak without fear of retribution. And he asked good questions that later, I mean, I still follow some of the things that he taught me that morning about how to get to information. And you do it with an indirect approach. He walked us through how many guys joined, how many were initiated, and how many are actually living in the house. And through that process, it became clear that we were losing close to 40% of the men who joined the
Mm.
chapter because of the hazing. And they wouldn't come out and say that, but that was the deal.
And we'll be right back. There's a difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in means changing who you are to be accepted. Belonging means showing up as your authentic self and knowing you'll be valued just as you are. True belonging is about trust, connection, and the freedom to be real. It's where you find your people, your purpose, and the confidence to stand strong in who you are. If you're ready to stop fitting in and start belonging, visit mariannecale.com or scottfuselcoaching.com to schedule a conversation to learn more. Belonging. Be real. Be seen. Be you. Now back to the show.
And then the other time was barely 4 days later, our president had told us we're going to have a very controversial interfraternity council meeting. A former IFC president, who is in fact a member of Scott's fraternity, Gamma Psi chapter at Michigan State, and he was booted out in the spring for some improprieties, and he's going to try to make a comeback. So Theta Chi volunteered to host the meeting. He said, if you don't have any business with the IFC, stay away from the basement, because that's where we're going to be having the meeting, in our chapter house. So, of course, I forgot that. And I burst open the doors, and there's 70 people looking at me like I'm an intruder, which I was. And Don, our president, is waving his arms. So I went over and sat next to him, trying not to look too dumb. But there I am. I'm stuck. And then Don said, you're a communications major, aren't you, Dave? You're journalism. I said, I am. He said, why don't you take a look at this? They're looking for somebody to plug in. I said, oh, no, I want to devote all my time to Theta Chi. But Don persisted and guided me over there the next day to the IFC office. And within 20 minutes, I decided I'm going to be an IFC officer, which led to me becoming IFC president. And then from there on into being an advisor to the IFC after I graduated. And they needed a plug-in because they didn't have anybody working. So I had to work part-time because they didn't have a master's, but that was fine with me. So that was my career. And I mean, that all got started. But in each point, in those absolutely unplanned, unscheduled things, I always have been expressing gratitude to those individuals who took the time to guide me and say, hey, you can do something here. You can have an impact.
So, one of the things I love about your story, you've got me thinking back to 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had an opportunity to support Beta's Winter Leadership Conclave in Chicago, and this young man was talking about how he sort of accidentally stumbled into Beta. And I don't think any of this stuff happens by accident. I think there's no coincidence that you stumbled into Nancy's game. I hope you caught that pass, and I hope you spiked the ball vigorously. But none of that stuff happened by accident, and you didn't mishear her by accident. That you landed exactly where you were supposed to land when you were supposed to land there, and look how the circumstances of that misunderstanding, for lack of a better term, look how many people that benefited. And if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be on this call, certainly. And my trajectory would look a lot different. Her trajectory and her perspective would not be what it is today. So thank God in heaven that you misunderstood her. And I don't think that happened by accident. So I'm really glad that that's the way things turned out, because we're all better because of it.
We had senior night for the first time in a while. They took all the seniors out to dinner just before we graduated. We're sitting on the front porch at 1:30 in the morning. Bob's got this nice suit that's all stained with beer and everything. And he's already bemoaning how he's going to feel the next morning. But he said, what are you going to do after graduation? Have you ever thought about law school? And I said, no. That's the first time anyone had ever said that to me. He said, you speak well, you write well. I think you got to take a look at it. And in a matter of seconds, I mean, he changed the complete trajectory of my life, his encouragement. And so I applied, took the LSAT, I nailed that, but my grades weren't that good. So it took another year and a half, got my grades back up, finally got admitted to law school, and then went part-time at night because in Detroit, because I wanted to keep my job working with the fraternities during the day. And it was a long trek, but I made it. And Bob was the one that planted that idea in me. And
Wow.
so it's amazing how people can impact your life in ways you have no, as you guys point out, you don't think about it until it happens, and then you think, wow, this guy or this woman really hit me and changed the course of what I did.
Well, and I think it's a great
Dave,
reminder that how some people see gifts in us that we can't even see for ourselves.
Yes.
And well, Mac, that's how we open the show. Like I don't have the experience I had this weekend. If you and Amanda don't see that I'm capable of something, and if I would have just been anybody else would have called up and said, "Can you do this?" I don't know that I would have said yes, but y'all said, "Yeah, you can do it. So go make it happen." And Dave, he spoke into you in a way that you couldn't speak into
right.
yourself, and that should be at our best. That should be what fraternity does.
Well, and Dave, we've been fortunate. We've been interviewing some great folks in the industry, people who have been your longtime friends and our longtime
Hmm.
friends. The concept of mentorship keeps coming up. And in today's world, we're trying to figure out how to create these programs and systems and all these things. And in actuality, your fraternity brother, right? He was mentoring you, but never said, "Let me take you under my wing and I'm going to mentor
Sure.
you." He
That's
just saw,
exactly right.
he observed you, he cared about you, and he put something right in your thought process to say, I think you can do this. And I often tell students, those folks who don't join fraternities and sororities, I hope they join something, right? That's
Yeah.
going to give
Yes.
them folks to be able to see their gifts and talents and to encourage that. It's one thing to see something. It's a whole nother thing to say it, right? And to encourage it and to continue to journey along with that person. I think about the fact that that guy at 1:30 in the morning drinking some beer said to you, right? "Dave, I think you can do this." And then look at what transpired that has impacted generations of an industry that we wouldn't be here today had that
Mhm.
conversation not happened on that
Yeah.
porch that evening for you. So, those are the kind of things I think that folks who only see the negative in fraternity and sorority don't hear these stories, which is why we've committed to doing this. And we want people to know the Dave Westols of the world and how you got here. Because who knows? If you hadn't
Yeah.
joined Theta Chi, what would that have looked like? And then you not only went to law school, you then went to work for your fraternity. I mean, how did all that happen?
After I started in law school, I was young and dumb, and I wrote a letter to our executive director at the time, Howard Alter Jr., whom you guys may know and may have known, I should say. And Howard left us in 2009, but I said, "Hey, Howard, I'm a hot shot advisor to the IFC, and I know what I'm doing. So if you want me to work with a couple of Theta Chi chapters in the state of Michigan, I can do that." And about 2 weeks later, my roommate came up to me, Don Tolby, and said, "Hey, there's somebody sent you a bowling ball in a box." And I went down, and sure enough, there's a box with a Trenton, New Jersey postmark, and it weighed about 16 pounds. And I brought it up, and it's a box filled with forms and paper, and on the top is a memorandum from a guy named Emerson Hamilton, the national counselor for Theta Chi, saying, "Welcome to the regional staff." So I became a regional counselor, and there was no onboarding, no training. You just did it. But I went out and started visiting chapters, and that led to going to my first convention in 1978. And one of the alumnus members there, a guy named Tom Van Cleve, said, "There aren't as many people here as I think there should be." We were in Chicago at the Marriott O'Hare. And I said, being who I am, "Well, there's a reason for this." And I said, "We didn't do any publicity. I mean, I'm appalled. We didn't have any. There's no mailings. There's no posters. I've been watching other fraternities do this for 4.5 years. Beta Theta Pi, Sigma Chi, SAE, through all the magazines I get. and they're kicking our butt. We don't do anything. They're so far ahead of us and how they set this up and encourage attendance and this and that. And Tom started writing notes on the back of a menu page from TGIF near the hotel. And next thing I know, I'm chairman of the Convention Publicity Committee for 1980. And that led to my election to the national board because people saw my name, I think, because I hated unsigned or unidentified letters. So I made a point of saying, David Westol, on behalf of the Convention Publicity Committee. And the stuff I did was so basic, it's embarrassing. But for my fraternity, that was something that had never been done. So I get all that, and then I get nominated for the board from the governing board, and now I'm national vice president. I have no idea what I'm doing. I call Howard after a couple of weeks, and I said, "Shouldn't I be doing something?" So a couple of weeks later, apparently Howard felt sorry for me. He called me and said, "Would you like to be our delegate to the North American, or at that time National Interfraternity Conference?" Well, sure, that's a privilege. So I end up traveling down to, in those halcyon days, AFA and NIC met together.
That's right.
And this was in Fort Lauderdale. And on the flight down, I'm talking with a guy from Chicago who is an attorney. And I'm on a panel discussion for hazing. And he asked me what I would do if there was a death from hazing in Michigan as an assistant prosecutor, which I was doing. And I said, well, I'd probably charge involuntary manslaughter. And the more I thought about it, I started involuntarily to put this thing together. At the session, the other two people didn't take up the time they thought. So I had a lot of time to fill. So I did a little mock trial. Well, about a week later, a guy named Mark Anderson, a Pi Kappa Alpha consultant, called me and said, we'd like you to come to our president's conference in Memphis in January and speak and do what you did at AFA. So I ended up doing that, wrote out a script. We actually had live witnesses. And I remember on the flight home, I was going to leave the script in one of the seat back pockets. And then I thought, I may need this again. But little did I know that I would be doing this for the next literally 25 years with probably close to 3,000 presentations. So
Wow. I didn't know that's how hazing on trial started.
yeah, it was a pure, another one of those happenstance things, but filling in some time, but it seemed to resonate with folks. And
Clearly.
I don't do it these days. I think students today are not as amenable to a very direct approach like that. They're looking for more subtlety. So my style with that particular presentation is just too intense. So that was how I got started.
Well, and you know what's interesting, Dave, is I was a fraternity and sorority affairs professional for 10 years at Southeastern Louisiana University. And the only chapter that we brought to our campus during those 10 years was Theta Chi. And, you know, so many of the young men that to this day are still important in my life are young men who joined the fraternity during that time. The kind of men that you attracted, one, but the way that you brought those men in, and it was just so impressive because it was fraternity men, right? We know the difference in frat boys and fraternity men. And to this day, I mean, one of them died very unexpectedly, and I walked into the funeral home where he was being laid to rest, and they all just turned around and they just lined up and hugged me and hugged me and hugged me, and they were like, "Okay, now we're okay. Mama's here," and I'm like, "What?" And they're just like, "Yeah, you know, you helped raise us too." And so, of course, I pissed some of them off, I'm sure, but you know, at the end of the day, it was a privilege to watch the way you all, as a fraternity, and you, right, had such an impact on those young men. John Smith became one of my very good friends because he came here to work, and I would sing at this little place called Wall Street, and they would come, and I mean, they just became a part of my life. And so, I'm always grateful to your leadership because you were executive director then. You know, Theta Chi was making a lot of changes and they were chasing those betas and those other groups of fraternity men who you did a great job and really changed Theta Chi during your time there. So thank you, sir, for that. I can tell you.
Thanks for joining us for part 1 of our conversation with Theta Chi's Dave Westol. We'll pick up right here on the next episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. See you next time. Today's show was hosted by Dr. Marianne Kale and Scott Fussell. For more, please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also follow Dr. Mack and Scott on social or on the web at mariannekale.com and scottfussellcoaching.com. Thanks again for tapping play and joining us for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. This has been a Find Your People production.